Have you ever started watching a show and then realized that everyone was speaking English, and then thought, why? In fiction set on Earth, maybe this makes sense, but in any non-Earth setting, be it sci-fi or fantasy, this is very weird. Let's examine why. There are, in fact, multiple languages in the world. It's notoriously hard to count or even estimate, but Ethnologue lists 7,170 at the time of writing the script. But those are just the languages that the Summer Institute of Linguistics, my favorite evangelical Christian nonprofit organization, has approved an ISO code for. Wait, why is the number we're using one that an evangelical Christian nonprofit organization came up with? Wouldn't that be bias? Okay, but that's a different video. The main point is that there are a lot of languages, and this is because languages evolve over time, and change to better fit the environment of the speakers. Language is also inherently arbitrary, leading to endless possibilities. As in, if language were to evolve on an alien planet or a fantasy universe, it would be impossible for their language to develop to be the same as English, the English island language. So why is it that in so many works of fiction that don't take place in a universe with the Anglo-Saxon island, people speak English? Now there's one obvious fix. The story is translated into the vernacular of the audience. In other words, if the audience speaks Italian, of course the story would be translated into Italian from whatever fantasy language everyone is speaking, and perhaps translation liberties to make the story function better in the Italian language would be necessary. To a degree, the audience is expected to assume that this translation is taking place as a part of suspending their disbelief. In a lot of works of fiction, like, say, The World of Bone, this can work really well. Unfortunately, stories tend to follow the hero's journey. Part of the hero's journey is crossing the threshold into the unknown. This crossing of the threshold often transports characters into a completely new world. But then the characters can just understand each other? Like, once we've established that Geordie Shorty the Straw Man lives in Idaho and therefore speaks English, as soon as he ends up in Fantasyland, we're supposed to believe that everyone speaks Anglo-Saxon island language. Huh? Like Narnia, the Wizard of Oz, and Amphibia. You know, the big three. Person starts off somewhere in the United States, goes through a portal of some sort, ends up in a new world where civilizations have risen and fallen without a soul knowing about Anglo-Saxon Landia, and the main character is able to communicate with no issue. Am I the only one whose immersion is completely broken? Yes? Oh. Okay, well, I'm still gonna make the video. These three stories do very little to explain why. Once the threshold is crossed, everyone speaks Neo-Anglo-Saxon language. They may purport to have rich cultures and world building, but that can fall apart when every culture speaks a language that developed in a very specific sociolinguistic climate and period on this island here in Europe. So this is where I'll get flack for saying bad things about Avatar. No, not that Avatar. Actually, both Avatars. Right now I'm just talking about The Last Airbender though, okay? I won't beat around the bush. This show is known for creating one of the most engaging worlds of all time, captivating audiences around the globe with its vast cultural diversity and deep traditions rooted in— But why does everyone speak English? At the beginning of the show, we have an airbender who's been frozen in an iceberg for 100 years. In 100 years, language changes a lot. So why is it that the dialect of Anglo-Saxon Kingdom of England language that they speak is exactly the same? Why is it that Avatar Roku also has the same dialect? And Kyoshi, and Kurik, and Yangchen? She died 500 years before the show takes place. Why isn't she speaking early modern English like Shakespeare? Linguistic colonization is terrible, and it's always present in the violence of cultural genocide, which is the main trauma shared by the characters of the Southern Water Tribe. So this is why it's disappointing that Sokka, Katara, and Aang all talk exactly the same. Briefly, and only for a joke, the show explores how regional-specific lingo has changed over the past century in the Fire Nation. Apparently, it just disappeared, and now everyone just speaks normal or whatever. The only particularly marked accents we get from recurring characters are the swamp folk, and they just sound like they're from rural Alabama. Everything else is just English. Until they meet the Sun Warriors, a group of people who Zuko thought were extinct, whose design is clearly inspired by Mesoamerican cultures. They are so isolated that they haven't interacted with outsiders in decades since Uncle Iroh showed up briefly. They could have realized that it would be virtually impossible for the language spoken by the Sun Warriors to be identical to the language spoken everywhere else. They could have played around with the language barrier a bit, or introduced an interpreter, and used that for jokes, and actually included Yucatec Maya or Nahuatl, but nope, they speak English. I guess they give this one guy a native-sounding accent. So my question is, if language is representative of how a culture sees the world, does this mean that all cultures in Avatar see the world the same way? No, of course not, which is why this doesn't work. But Avatar The Last Airbender has enough merits to just handwave this, like this is genuinely one of my favorite shows. Now I guess their writing is in English, it's Chinese, and apparently it's accurate according to Shiran Jie. But like, what language are they supposed to be writing with those Han characters? Do people learn how to write in Chinese even though they speak English, a language with no similar features? I don't know, it just makes it more confusing. I am fully aware that this is probably just a me thing, but this made it very difficult for me to suspend my disbelief enough to fall in love with the universe in the same way that I've been able to do with other media I'll talk about later. And hey, it's not that bad. At least nobody was frozen for 5,000 years or something and then woke up speaking perfect British fancy island language. It would be quite the blunder if they did that. So glad that the oldest they went back was just a tenth of that, because we barely have records of language from 5,000 years ago, so it would be completely unrealistic. Anyway, perhaps a much less controversial show is Steven Universe. Why the hell do gems just speak English? They mention a gem writing system at one point, but what language is it writing down? English? The audience is left speculating, and none of this speculation is confirmed. But it's not treated as a mystery, it's just a hole in the world building. Okay, now let's talk about Invincible, the show that my roommate described as, oh, is that the show where all the people punch the people? Yes, Lyle, that is what happens in Invincible. So not only does Invincible have every single alien species inexplicably speak English, but it doesn't just try to handwave it. It sets up an explanation, and then just doesn't explain it. In the 4th episode, Mark meets Martians and asks, "You speak English?" after being able to communicate with the Martians, and the Martian responds and says, "We speak Martian." While I was researching for this video, Amazon Prime Video told me that this is a reference to the comics. So I bought the comic and found the quote-unquote reference, and it was exactly the same more or less. It just happens in a different room, and the wording is a little different. So not really a reference, Amazon, it's just an adaptation of the material. So why is this disappointing to me? Well, the media is clearly aware of the problem. Aliens speak the language that comes from the Angles and Saxons island, but instead of justifying it, it does nothing. Unlike Avatar, no, not that one, this one, where I can assume that they just didn't think about it enough to realize that it was a big problem, I know for a fact that the creators of Invincible did, and they didn't do anything about it. By the way, this is the only thing I dislike about Invincible. It's otherwise a perfect show with high-quality animation and 0 power scaling problems. But this, it's like a slap in the face. They didn't do anything about the problem. So what about shows that do something about the problem? For a prime example, let's turn to Apple TV, which I also have a subscription that I pay for the subscription that I have for it. WondLa is an animated TV adaptation of a set of 3 books that I read as a kid. The 2nd episode actually tackles language really well. In fact, everyone speaks different languages. So how do they understand each other? Simple. Alien gum. You chew it a bit, and you can understand all languages. And it's some wild technology, because putting the gum inside this robot made her able to understand all languages as well. Now, I have some problems with this, which I'll get to later, but for now, let's focus on this universal translator trope as it's used in this show. Or rather, how it's not used. Eva, the main character, meets this funky alien guy. Due to wacky hijinks, it takes 12 full minutes for the alien guy to give Eva the alien gum, and an additional 4 minutes for him to introduce himself as Rovender. Why does it take so long? Well, they're getting chased by an alien for a long portion of it, but largely, it gives the show a chance to characterize Rovender with nonverbal cues. It's impossible for Rovender to tell the audience that he's upset, or that he doesn't care about Eva but saved her life anyway, or that he's annoyed at her incompetence, because there's a language barrier. So they use really well animated facial expressions, and more importantly, actions. When they first meet, Rovender cuts Eva down from a carnivorous alien plant. It's obvious to him that she can't understand him, but he doesn't reach for the gum yet because he's hoping she'll just leave him alone. For context, this is the first human he's ever seen, so it's really clear characterization that he isn't interested in Eva. And it also leaves the question, which does get an answer later, why did he save Eva anyway? The gum allows cultural diversity to exist in the form of language without taking up too much of the runtime, but it's also used as a plot point to allow for characterization. I seldom see that anywhere. In the 2nd season, one of the characters, out of probably racism, refuses to take the gum, which is not only strong characterization but also drives the plot based on a character flaw, which is one of my favorite ways to drive the plot. It really makes me relate to a character while also hating them. Editing Lipamanca here. I'm watching through season 3 right now, and the alien gum, which is called jar gum, is also used as a pretty powerful symbol in the last episode, but I really don't want to spoil it, so I won't say how. It's not a perfect show, but it does a lot of things right, so I think it deserves more eyes. I think that a lot of the alien technology in this show kind of bridges that gap of so powerful it's indistinguishable from magic, and in that sense, I think jar gum fits into a soft magic system. I think universal translators have the potential to do very well in soft magic systems, actually, which is not something I've really talked about in this video. Okay, back to the video. But WondLa doesn't play around nearly enough with possible mistranslations. Language is complicated, and there's no way any technology could, I guess, hegemonize cultures in very fashion. WondLa does a good job of having aliens avoid English idiomatic expressions, sure, but it doesn't have any good moments where an alien idiom gets mistranslated. Or, well, it has been a while since I watched the show, so if anyone wants to correct me, I'll put it in a pinned comment with any other necessary corrections. In fact, you should all go check right now to see if I made a pinned comment with any necessary corrections. In A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's a little fish you put in your ear. While this is a little funny, I guess, it's endlessly disappointing from a world-building perspective. The kinds of people that Arthur Dent meets throughout his wacky sci-fi misadventures are the same kinds of people you'd expect to meet in the United States or Europe. There's very little cultural diversity that the books explore in earnest. And yeah, it's a comedy, sure. It's not trying to have such an intense depth of world-building. But it disappoints me. On the other hand, the second best hospital in the galaxy starts off with some really interesting linguistics. In the first episode, Dr. Clack is characterized as a multicultural savant. In this show, we hardly ever see two members of the same species that aren't explicitly in the same family. The universe is simply too big and diverse for one species to dominate, and unlike Star Wars, there are no direct humans. Dr. Clack meets this random bug guy in the hallway of the first episode and speaks fluently in their language. In the next episode, she translates Dr. Plaup's cause too, and we learn a little bit about Plaup's culture. This ability to speak languages is one of her key character traits that sets her apart from the other doctors, and it's presented as something that they're going to build the world with. But then the show just drops that. And in season 2, there's this orb that makes it so everyone in the galaxy, or perhaps universe, is able to understand one another in a completely opaque way. Like there's some orb translating for them light years away, and the differences in culture, present, and language just collapse. If every character wasn't obviously a different species, I would assume that they were all from the same general sociologic background. They basically threw out the linguistic diversity with an orb, and one of the character's character traits is completely gone. I still love this show, and the last few episodes of the second season made me cry because of how they treat stigmatized illness, but they almost did something interesting here with language. So with science fiction, you can use an alien fish or a special chewing gum or a big orb, and say that it uses fancy technology to fix the language barrier and make everyone in the universe effectively speak English. But how does it work? Obviously, every sci-fi story is going to have a different answer to this question, and some, like Star Trek, offer more than one contradictory explanation. But I am not a Star Trek person, and I wasn't going to just become one for this video, so instead of using real examples of not real fictional media, I'm going to make up some examples based on how real-life translator devices work. We do not understand the physical mechanisms of cognition at all. That is to say, we don't really know how the brain does language. We know what parts of the brain are associated with certain aspects of language, but the precise mechanisms around the fine differences in cognition that come from differences in language are some of the most elusive things in science. So it would be lunatic to have a universal translator just need to scan someone's brain, unless you wanted to imply that the scientific understanding of this world is great enough to have solved that problem, which is probably a really bad idea for power scaling, because the same knowledge could be used for mind reading and potentially mind control really easily, like without much extra work required. It's a bad idea to have your sci-fi setting no longer treat this brain thing as a black box without knowing that you have done that. So unless the main antagonist is trying to mind control everyone with the new capitalism language brain scan technology or something, there will probably be potholes. Be warned. So that's how not to do a universal translator. How about real life? Well, many translators use neural networks, including Google Translate and the majority of similar projects. You might be thinking, a lot of things. I don't have enough time in this video to talk about all of them. Let's put the ethics of AI aside for now and just look at translator software as a trope in fiction. So, do you know how much data it takes for real AI to be able to reliably translate between two languages? Not a couple of sentences, that's for sure. In reality, it needs a huge data set. I'm talking probably thousands of sample sentences at the very least. It also needs to be fed their translations into the target language. So in real life, in order to build a translator that can translate between languages X and Y, you need a dataset created and verified by someone who already speaks languages X and Y. Perhaps a universal translator is just so well made and maintained that it has access to all of these data about how all languages are translated into each other. Perhaps there's a special type of dataset that has like 1 million sentences and each sentence is translated into every known language, and maybe neural networks scan that really quickly. It could work. 1 million example sentences is pretty decent for a dataset, but there are diminishing returns. If you add an extra 1,000 sentences to a 100 sentence dataset, the quality of the translations vastly improves. But if you add an extra 1,000 sentences to a 100,000 sentence dataset, there's virtually no change. So the amount of data required goes up exponentially, as the quality and reliability of of translations goes up linearly. And adding a new language to a universal translator that uses neural networks would take, at the very least, months, because putting together a dataset still requires someone who speaks both languages proficiently enough to verify the dataset. And then you need to make sure that all of the languages translate effectively into each other for each example sentence. You need to take into account idioms, and that can mess with how the neural network thinks the languages work. There are so many problems with this. Now, there is some stuff out there, I think, about using AI to generate these datasets and then using humans to verify them, and I myself have been impressed by the quality of some of these datasets, but then I realized that the datasets I was impressed by were generated using Google Translate, which already has access to huge datasets, so never mind, I'm not impressed anymore. The logistics of a science fiction universal translator give me a headache, and I definitely get why people just hand-wave them, but I can offer some alternatives. Solve the problem with translators, or have most people speak multiple languages, as is the case in most parts of the world, so a crew of people can weave their own backstories into the plot episodically. And I get why this can be tough. Most fiction writers do not know how to convincingly pull off multiple different things that sound like different languages, and most productions cannot afford to pay David J. Peterson and Jesse Peterson to make several conlangs for one movie. My solution is simple. Don't make full conlangs. Make vague sketches that could be developed later. Some care would be needed, but all you really need is a phonological system and a sketch for the grammar, and then just keep track of what means what with interlinear gloss. And yes, I understand that most people don't know how to do that, but I do. Hire me to do this. Or a different linguist. I feel like most linguists have the requisite experience to do this. Or even a conlanger who isn't a linguist. There's a lot you can do with a linguist on your writing team. Hire me. I'm talking about myself. This would be a dream job. Hire me to do this. Or if you don't want to do that, perhaps tell a story of linguistic colonization throughout a galaxy, where you can expect people on most planets to speak English because they were colonized by people from the colonization island back on Earth. These stories can resonate with people from all over the world, including even most white people in the United States. Instead of me screaming at my television, "Why is everyone speaking English?" I'll be looking out the window, wonton, whispering wistfully, "Why is everyone speaking English?" And then I'll be looking inward, asking, "Why don't I speak Yiddish?" And that's powerful storytelling. Alright, enough sci-fi for now. Fantasy as a genre is heavily influenced by Tolkien, an author frequently described to have made Lord of the Rings as an excuse for his creation of invented languages. So there's a precedent for fiction in the genre to have many languages, and to not handwave this. Let's start with D&D, which kind of based its whole world off of Tolkien's project and then took over fantasy as a backdrop. With the power of arcane and divine magic, characters in a D&D game are able to solve the problem with an in-universe handwave. Yes, of course everyone speaks different languages, but the DM doesn't, probably, so with a simple spell that almost anyone can learn to cast, you can understand the literal meaning of any statement. The literal meaning. This has the potential to be really interesting. If comprehend languages just translates meaning and changes word order to fit the native language of the caster, the natural idiomaticity can come through constantly, allowing the rich cultures of the people who speak those languages to come through. And yeah, I've never seen comprehend languages used this way. Maybe once. Not even Brennan Lee Mulligan does this as far as I know. There's a fix though. Some spells in D&D give advice to the DM about how to roleplay them. If the spell description for comprehend languages was elaborated a little bit, maybe I could say with confidence that some DMs do this well and use it as a tool to build the world for their players. But this is not the case, so I can't say that. I don't know, if any D&D YouTubers are watching this and want to make a collab video about how to better DM comprehend languages, please reach out. I really want to make that video with someone who really knows how to run D&D. Now, remember that sci-fi trope about the universal translator? I talked a bit about how that works because science fiction is fiction rooted in science, which is a real thing. Fantasy is not that. So how does comprehend languages work in D&D? Well, I could understand it if it was a divine spell, meaning it would be cast by a cleric, or maybe a druid. It would make some sense. An external deity, or Mother Nature or something, who knows way more languages than any mortal could possibly know, who has the ability to make miracles come true with the power of divine intervention, has responded to the prayer of one of her devotees and allowed them to understand and communicate with other intelligent life. But it's an arcane-only spell. Bard, sorcerer, wizard, warlocks, those are all arcane. That means that there's no god to channel magic through them. The only people who can cast this spell are the ones who use magic that is dependent on their own understanding of the universe, as an individual. Okay, I know about the weave as a concept, and I'm sure you could say, oh, what if it was just the god of magic? Or what if the weave speaks all the languages? But that doesn't make any sense to me, because this is a first-level spell. How would it be easy for someone manipulating the weave through their own knowledge or innate ability to understand all languages? Is language encoded within the weave? Also, the weave is specific to a few settings, like Faerun, so it's not a universal concept for all of D&D, so it might be up to the DM to explain how comprehend languages could possibly be an arcane first level spell. But like, I don't think it could. If you have an idea, please let me know in a comment. I would be very interested to hear what you have to say. Okay, so even though in fantasy you can cast a spell to understand languages, most fantasy media doesn't do that. Everyone just speaks English. Or maybe they call it common, or the common tongue, or Tamrielic or something. But it is literally the fish and chips pub island language. And the idea of there being more than one language in the first place never comes up. Most media handwaves this, like Avatar. No, not that. Okay, fine. I'll talk about the blue people. Media like Avatar, with the blue people, or Game of Thrones, or Lord of the Rings, actually do have a conlang, because they hire a linguist. This is obviously the best way to deal with the problem. Just don't have the problem. No need to solve the problem of why is everyone speaking English if half of the people are speaking Dothraki, and these languages are built expertly to flesh out the culture, and are incorporated into the story in such a way that they are able to do that. At least I think so. I haven't seen any of these, but usually I can trust that if David J. Peterson was involved, the world building will shine through a constructed language modeled around and intertwined with a culture. Or you get Pixar's Elemental, which basically gave him a bunch of money for a single phatic phrase. While this is the best option for completely original world building, it's also by far the most labor intensive. Conlanging takes a lot of skill to do well, and if any of the media that I've listed here that doesn't currently have them tried to add them without employing a professional conlanger, which in my opinion is rarely worth the money that the Language Creation Society recommends, the conlang will hurt the art more than it can help it. So what other options are there? I'm so glad you asked. Let's look at two of my favorite video games, Disco Elysium and Esoteric Ebb. Esoteric Ebb is defined as a disco-like, which means that it was created to be structured like Disco Elysium, and a lot of its world building takes inspiration from Disco Elysium, so it's not surprising that they have the same solution. Just use real-world language. This is not the exact solution they used. They both play around with the language. For example, in Disco Elysium, there's some sort of mix of Spanish and Portuguese. Like, this woman pronounces a few Portuguese words with a Spanish accent, and apparently this language is from a place called Villa Lobos, which is named after a Brazilian composer? That's where I recognize the term from anyway. This woman speaks Malay. They have a lot of languages plastered all over the place, and they use them to patch together a funhouse mirror version of the languages in real life, which is kind of how the world building of Disco Elysium works generally. In Esoteric Ebb, while the catfolk language resembles Spanish, it is probably some sort of altered version of Old Spanish. This elf seems to know Finnish. Dwarven is some sort of Nordic language. I haven't fully investigated all of these, but I wouldn't be surprised if they sounded strange to speakers from real life. Perhaps this strategy is uniquely well suited for video games. Not sure, but I know for sure that it's one of the most practical ways to include linguistic diversity in a story. In Esoteric Ebb, you are able to cast a Comprehend Languages spell, and multiple other characters will cast it on themselves for you, if they're from a different location or species. While they don't explain the mechanisms of how the spell works, they play around with it wonderfully. Like, sometimes something just won't translate well, and that's really good. And obviously the person who's talking doesn't know that it didn't translate well, so you have to tell them, and then they comment on it. And the spell is working as an interactive video game mechanic, not just as a way to get everyone to speak language from where the Beatles are from language. And for an honorable mention, Enna, Dream Barbecue. This coin cat speaks Russian. This weasel speaks Italian. This Russian doll speaks Greek. You have characters everywhere who just speak other languages, but they all understand each other anyway. Or at least they understand you, Enna, and you understand them because you're given subtitles. This really works for Enna because the world is built on surrealism. Of course the language usage is surreal. It's very novel. I love it. So what else? Surely I missed an obvious piece of fiction. Go comment about it. Do you disagree? Do you think that my takes on Avatar are sacrilegious? No, this Avatar. Thank you to my patrons, which... wow? That's a lot more than before? Incredible, I guess I have to make more videos now. While supporting me on Patreon is a good way to support my work, so is watching my videos, so don't feel obligated, but it does help motivate me to have more Patreon supporters. Plus, I might upload some clips just for the patrons before a video comes out. I just realized I end all of my videos with a calque of a phrase in Tokipona that doesn't translate well, but even then I feel like most Tokipona speakers these days aren't aware of the original story behind the whole eat a good fish